The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Simplify NERC Compliance with a Controls-Based Approach. My name is Leah Morse, and I'm a Marketing Communications Specialist here at Qualtrics. Your presenter today will be Terry Schurter, our Control Strategist at Qualtrics. So let me tell you a little about Terry. Terry's been working with controls since the beginning of his career. He is an award-winning controls engineer, winner of the International George Westinghouse Signature of Excellence Award, and a prolific writer. He's authored and co-authored a number of published business books, and most relevant to today's conversation, the two NERC compliance books you see in the presentation here, Protecting Critical Infrastructure and the SIP Low Compliance Program Guide. That's right, he literally wrote the book on NERC. So I'll be handing things over to Terry shortly, but first, let me tell you a little about Qualtrics. We are a compliance management software company, and we take a technology team approach. We offer an electronic quality management system to our customers, but we also pair it with our team commitment to those customers and their industries to ensure that we're really helping to simplify their technology burdens. We were founded in 1993 and are ISO 9001 registered and have been that way since 1996. We are also proud Qualtrics users ourselves, and we actually use it in-house for our own compliance initiatives. Our office is located in downtown Blacksburg, Virginia, home of Virginia Tech, and in fact, many of our team members are Virginia Tech graduates. The majority of our team is located in the Blacksburg office, including our top-notch services and support team, but Terry and I are two oddballs, and we are coming to you today from the great state of Texas. Finally, I just want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put them in the GoToWebinar questions area, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And with all that out of the way, I think we're ready to get started. So I'll hand things over to Terry.
Thank you, Leah. So my name is Terry Schurter, and I'm going to attempt to live up to that slide that covered me as best I can and talk a little bit about simplifying NERC compliance with a controls-based approach. So one of the things that we're doing at Qualtrics is we're trying to do a lot of work around simplification in regards to compliance. I think all of us know that NERC compliance is really complicated most of the time, and we're spending an awful lot of time on that. So there's got to be some things we can do that would actually help us to relieve some of that burden, make compliance simpler, and basically help us be compliant with more confidence while still having more time to actually do our normal day jobs. So I kind of want to go through what we've actually been designing and working through from a controls-based approach. What we're hoping to do and what we're working on is trying to take a very consistent controls-based approach to all NERC compliance. We're starting with SIP low, but also working on the medium and high, and as well as some of the 693 ops and planning standards. So just to give you an idea that we believe this controls approach will apply to all the buckets. I'm sure there's going to be some adjustments along the way, but let's go ahead and dig in. That's the important stuff. Let's see what we think a controls-based approach really looks like. So I like to start by breaking it down and really say, what are the big pieces that I have to deal with? So one of the things, and again, this is very NERC specific and based on all the time that I've been working in the industry, that one of the things we have to do a lot of is we have to collect, interact, and manage evidence. And I mean, I've talked to different utilities that literally have thousands of documents that actually are the evidence they would use to demonstrate performance-based compliance for NERC SIP. So obviously, documents are going to have to be managed well. They're going to have to be managed effectively, and we've got a lot of things we have to collect and interact with. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. We obviously have to be able to assign tasks to the proper people. So part of what we're going to do when we think about controls is we actually need to start identifying who's going to need to do work in this process. And not necessarily identifying specific individual people, but we need to start mapping the job roles over to our controls. So we really kind of have a pretty good understanding of these are the roles we need to do this work. We also need to orchestrate our compliance processes. So a lot of what we have to do, I mean, if you think about a process can be as simple as a document that describes what we're going to do, has the steps we're going to do it in, and so forth. And that certainly is a description of a process. But we need to orchestrate our compliance processes better so that people don't have to go to a document and follow it. So we really need to have a mechanism that kind of bakes in a lot of that, and that's going to be workflow, and I'll talk about that some more as we go along as well. One of the other areas that I like to always talk about is the two things that people probably have to do more than anything else is the number one, which is collect and interact and manage evidence, but then they also need to provide the feedback that allows us to demonstrate that we've actually met all of our compliance checklist items. So there's a lot of importance in having a really good compliance checklist because that's our attestation that we actually did something that maps directly to one or more compliance requirements. Obviously, when we're thinking about all this stuff, there's a certain amount of it that's going to have to be scheduled. So we want to make sure we have the ability to do scheduling. Some things are event-driven, meaning if something changes, I need to go do something. I have to do it in a compliant manner. But a lot of things are on a scheduled basis, whether it's 35 days, quarterly, 15 months, or whatever. So we need to make sure we bring that together as well. And then we have to intelligently organize evidence. So when we kind of look at the world, that's the 7 big pieces that we see, or 6 big pieces, I should say, that we see from a controls-based perspective. Now, the next step, what I want to do is I actually want to shift a little bit and actually look at one of our, the documentation on one of our controls, just to kind of demonstrate how we're approaching that and actually put in a little more context around it. So let's go ahead and start looking at that. So this particular example is a low impact BES impact ratings assessment. And so look at what we're doing now. We're starting to be a little more descriptive. We're starting to focus on the control. What's its purpose? Well, we use it to perform our BES impact rating assessment. In particular, this control meets that compliance for low impact only BES assets. So it's very, very clear what this control is supposed to do. How is it going to work? Well, we're going to use it to document the assessment of our assets. And I like to point out something here that's quite interesting because this, to me, is part of how we really drive down and add some automation into our controls to make things simpler. On the low impact side, and again, this is specific for low, but it's a good example. Really, if we are applying our physical security controls and our electronic access right controls against the BES asset, not against the specific targeted BES cyber systems or BES cyber assets, it's really intended to be protect the parent, if you will, and that means protecting all those BES cyber systems and BES cyber assets within it. But because the controls, the physical security controls and electronic access rights for low are actually going to be based on that BES low only BES asset list, if we change something in that list, we should automatically kick off these 2 controls because we need to update our physical security controls and our electronic access rights. So that's built right into this control. It's an example of simple automation that makes people's lives easier. If I started this control the way that Qualtrics has approached it, I could simply say yes or no, do I want to automatically kick these off? And one of the really great things is I can then actually transfer any information, including documents and assessments, on into these other workflows. So it becomes almost a single workflow the way it behaves. So that's just an example of some of the ways we can start really drilling down into our controls and start to really think about them in a very logical and pragmatic way. We also care about dependencies. There's other things we need to really start to understand. I mean, there's, as everyone knows, in NERC compliance, there's a lot of interconnections between the standards and so forth. So in this particular case, the main dependency on this particular control is the SIP senior manager control because it's a requirement that the SIP senior manager actually sign off on this assessment once it's been done. So obviously, the SIP senior manager can't sign off on it unless there is a SIP senior manager, so that makes the dependency very obvious. The other thing I'd like to point out at this stage is that we're actually going ahead and identifying job roles. How many different job roles are there really in this this control? And so when we kind of look at it on we've taken it forward, there's someone who's responsible for starting the control, or if it's already on a schedule, dealing with it when it first initiates. They're going to need to update the BES asset list, at least review it and see if there's anything that has to be changed, and then collect any evidence. So they're really the person who has done the work. At that point, once we've done the work, we still have to have a review and approval step. So we're going to have another job role that's actually responsible for reviewing and approving what the first person did. And then in this particular case, there's a third role because we need to have the SIP senior manager sign off. Now, obviously that could be condensed to 2 roles if the SIP senior manager is going to actually do the review and approval, but a lot of times the SIP senior manager will want someone else, some other subject matter expert to actually do that review and approval before they actually go ahead and review it for their approval. So this kind of demonstrates a little bit of what we're doing around thinking about how controls go, but I also want to point out something very, very important, which is what I consider to be a critical concept. So one of the things that's been driving me nuts for years, and for anybody on this call that's been involved in NERC compliance, I probably can guess that you've had the same experience. Really relating to the standards, requirements, and sub-requirements is a complete nightmare. So one of the things we want to do is we want to stop the standards and requirements from driving the controls and let the controls drive the program. And so what we're going to be doing, I'm not going to be covering it in great detail today, but just to kind of give a little example of how are we kind of understanding what's happening. Well, here is a control, here's that same control where I'm looking at now what standard requirements does the control actually meet. And this may actually trigger some aha moments, but as you can see, there are times when the standard's going to change and the requirements are still going to be fulfilled by the control exactly the way they were before. But it could be different requirements as well as versions go through. So a control can actually have a very long life. And in fact, in many cases, it can simply be revved when a version comes out so that it now can handle the new requirements in the new version, but the control's still there. It's still doing its thing. We only had to rev the control rather than go and try and rev our world, if you will. So I'm not going to go into this in real great detail today. We are having a webinar next Thursday on simplifying evidence management, where I'm actually going to go into the Qualtrics solution and demonstrate exactly how we're approaching that. One of the things that I'll say at the end of this call is that anybody who wants to have wants to get into any of this, you're always welcome to reach out to us at any time. I'm always available for just general conversations or to discuss this what we're doing. So if you can't wait, you can always get that sneak peek. I also wanted to show another example where, as we move across larger versions, we may still be able to, in this controls approach, actually be able to just keep moving our controls forward. We may have to change a few of our checklists. We may have to collect some additional evidence, but the control fundamentally is still doing the same thing, whether I'm doing my BES impact assessment or my security awareness or whatever I'm doing. Those things are not changing as much as the details behind them. So there's a different way to approach evidence management, and that's something we'll be talking about next week. So I wanted to just make sure I planted that seed really well and then talk a little bit more about getting into how we help people actually do compliance work. So 2 guiding principles of controls designs, and these are my go-tos. I always use these in every control that I design, and they are simplicity is the ultimate sophistication by Leonardo da Vinci. The concept that if I can truly make something so simple that anybody can do it successfully, that is sophistication. Then the other quote, though, that's also important, because we're dealing with compliance and we're dealing with engineering environments and we're dealing with operational technologies, is to make everything as simple as possible, but no simpler, by Albert Einstein. So what Albert Einstein observed is there is a lowest common denominator of simplification that if we go below, we're no longer able to actually achieve our goal. So his view was it must be as simple as possible, but no simpler, because there's a point where you'll actually start to break things. So taking those thoughts into mind, let's just look at how we're approaching the actual work in a compliance process in our controls-based approach. So here we're actually looking at the first step in our BES asset assessment. And I've highlighted that there's an activity. And the first activity is collect and manage evidence. So if I was going through the BES asset assessment, for example, there may be several things I need to provide. I may need to update the BES, the low impact only BES asset list. I may need to provide some new BES asset assessment evidence. I may include and upload some routable communication and dial-up connectivity supporting evidence, which is really what's going to tell me whether or not my BES low impact BES assets actually require certain the types of electronic controls that we really would apply if they do have routable communication and connectivity. So this is an activity where a person could easily deal with, here are all the artifacts that prove we did what we say we were supposed to do. And at that point, what we're really ready for is we're ready for someone to look at what's been done. So we would actually present all of that information that was done in the first step to the next person, and then they start to hit a compliance checklist. And so what things do we really want to make sure we have a positive response for, that we can demonstrate as part of our control report at the end? We asked these questions and we got these validations. So BES asset impact ratings, are they correct? Do we have the appropriate evidence? Is it complete and satisfactory? Same with the other routable communication and dial-up, and then we can go ahead and submit. So again, the main point that I'm really trying to drive for here is, as we start to be more pragmatic and more structured in how we do these things, we're also going to be engaging people in an activity that's going to be very, very comfortable for them, because it's always going to look the same. If we start to structure these compliance workflows based on a controls-based framework like this, and it could be a different framework, but if we really do that, I can teach you how to do one thing in my solution as a user, and you can pretty well do everything that I need you to do from that point forward, because we're providing a very, very consistent user experience. So I think a really big part of a controls-based approach is to get this pragmatic, to get this structured, and to create an approach that actually gives that level of consistency, so that people don't have to think about a compliance solution. They can think about doing their compliance activity, and that's it. So that's kind of a good idea of what we're looking at from a perspective of NERC compliance. I believe this applies to all buckets. As I mentioned before, we've already been doing quite a bit of work on SIP low. That's actually an out-of-the-box, ready-to-go solution now. And we're working on some of the medium and high, as well as 693 ops and planning controls, but they're all following the same pattern so far. It's been very, very consistent, and that evidence simplification, which I'm going to be demonstrating next week, will really add a lot into how we're actually achieving this, and giving people a lot more intuitive sense of, I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it, I know why I'm putting things here, I know why I should be expected to do this, and what I'm expected to do. So it's that general approach that I think has a tremendous amount of value. Coming back to just summing it up, as long as we can define a framework or an approach to controls that really is simpler for people to use, it's more effective because it follows a very consistent and logical approach, then we could actually do a lot about simplifying our overall compliance burden. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to any questions that people have, but I also want to make sure that I am available for anyone who wants to contact me one-off or through a formal, I want to talk with Qualtrics. It doesn't matter. A big part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to be as involved with people in the industry as possible. So a lot of this is just talking about, here's the problem, here's how we're approaching it, here's the weaknesses, here's the strengths, and we're all learning in this process. The goal that we have is not a short-term goal, it's a very long-term goal. We're eating the elephant one piece at a time, and I would say NERC compliance is definitely a really big elephant. But I think we need to be very pragmatic when we do this, and I think that the more we work together and we discuss these problems, the better off we'll be at actually understanding what a controls-based approach really needs to look like and how we can actually use that to really and truly make our compliance burden much simpler and to have a lot higher level of assurance that I'm in the place I need to be. I'm good to go. So at this point, I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. But I think that's all of our presentations today. I don't see any questions so far. But again, if you have any interest in just reaching out to me, just to have a casual conversation, if you'd like a full demo of what we're doing in Qualtrics, if you'd just like to, discuss different concepts, please reach out. Let's have conversations. Let's talk about this stuff. Let's figure out if we can really understand the things we really need to do, regardless of whose product it is or what design it is, to actually make NERC compliance easier. It's not going to go away. We have to do it. It's going to get more onerous as we go forward. So everything we can do to simplify our activity in ensuring we are compliant is just a good thing to do. So at this point, I don't see any questions. Let me just double check here. No, I don't see any questions. So I really appreciate your time. And again, I encourage you to reach out. This is going to be as casual or as formal of a contact as you want. It doesn't matter. We're all here for the same reason, and that's to help utilities be compliant, because you must be, and to make that as simple and easy as we possibly can. And that's a conversation we want to be in with you. So I appreciate it very much, and hope to see everyone next week for the evidence simplification webinar, where I'm going to show what I think is somewhat magical stuff, and it's going to be pretty darn cool. So I'd like to thank everyone, and we'll see you soon, and hope to hear from you soon as well. Thank you.